Greetings and welcome to another edition of the podcast for Dallas Area Opinion. I hope everyone is doing well. Welcome back. We're going to talk about some things that are going on. We're going to a little bit about the debate. Actually, I'm not going to talk about the debate. I'm just going to use that as a lead into my topic. We have a lot going on this planet, specifically the debate between Harris and Trump, though. There's a lot of things. I still think this election is Trump's to lose. There was a poll recently that they talk about where people say, who they trust better with the economy. And Trump did better in that poll than Harris, which somewhat shocks me. I'm kind of surprised by that. I think part of it was because for the first 3 years of Trump's presidency, the economy was pretty good. I don't think he really did that much for the economy. I just think it was just in good shape while he was president until the pandemic. The way he handled the pandemic kind of gives me an idea that if there was an economic catastrophe, I'd be a little worried. But according to the poll, many people trust Trump with the economy more than Harris. I'm not quite sure why. The few policies that Trump has stated that he supports, one of them includes tariffs. Not a big fan of tariffs. From what I understand about them, they're not really going to benefit people like myself, middle class, working class, lower class, upper middle class. They're going to add more to my budget in the long run. The way tariffs are talked about, they would be passed down through corporations to the retail price. We have enough inflation as it is, which is one problem facing Harris, that the Biden administration has been facing some pretty tough inflation for the last few years. So Trump's got people have a better opinion of Trump on the economy, but that brings back to one of the things he did while he was president was his tax cut that benefited the wealthy. Not quite sure why people think that benefited them. There was a small tax cut for the middle class, and eventually it's going to expire, I think, sometime coming up the next year or so. So that's going to go away, but the wealthy's tax breaks will continue. I'm more of a proponent that we should keep the middle class, lower class, working class, upper middle class, tax breaks for the people who do the day-to-day living in this country, this economy. And I'm not going to get into a lot of policy wonk numbers here. I'm actually going to use some illustrative numbers, but I'm not going to get into too much of the numbers about how much each person's tax rate should be. There's something called the Office of Management and Budget that Congress uses to help with making these financial decisions. I wouldn't mind having them run some numbers through some of my policies I've written over the years, just to get an idea how on target or off target I am. And it would be good if more people had access to how this process works that Congress gets to use, which, they're responsible, especially the legislative branch, is responsible for our budget. They're the controller of the purse strings by the Constitution. It's defined that way. So it's great they have an office that pretty much, from what I understand historically, is pretty nonpartisan. They pretty much give the elected representatives the information they need, or if their elected representatives so choose, they get to use it. But, I'm going to use some illustrative numbers here in a few minutes just to give you an idea, because I have an idea I'm going to use just to explain one policy idea. Mainly, the funny thing about it is, even though I'm going to be talking about taxes, income taxes, it's really more to help Social Security. Two birds with one stone kind of thinking here. But with the debate coming up, they will be talking about these kind of things. Hopefully, we'll get a better idea of maybe some actual policy ideas from both of them with some nuts and bolts that people who get into discussing nuts and bolts can discuss for us and give us a better idea of which person has better outline for the future of our economy. Again, though, I'm upset about the wealthy getting tax breaks because they really, honestly, I do not think wealthy getting tax breaks, especially in the personal wealth level, there's no benefit to it. I mean, they're just hoarding wealth. I mean, a lot of people say, well, they can go to hell. They don't need all that money. Well, as good Christians, we don't want people to go to hell. It's our job to keep people out of hell, and so that's one of the worst things you can wish for a person. So maybe we should just create some policies that help them stay out of hell and have them use their money a little bit more fruitfully for the larger economy, not just with taxes, but what they do with it. But one way we can do it through public policy is to change the tax rate a little bit and then put that money to use for the larger country, for the country as a whole. To get started, again, the income tax rates, and I don't have, again, the policy walk, the actual numbers, how we're going to do this, but I'm going to use an example, a numerical example, for illustrative purposes on how we can change the tax code a little bit to benefit Social Security. You have to understand a little bit about Social Security. The average worker puts in so much of his paycheck is deducted to pay Social Security taxes. They use the phrase taxes, Social Security taxes. And then your employer pays an amount into Social Security. So the actual amount of Social Security that is being put in is not coming from you, the worker. It's coming from you and your employer. And this, of course, gets a lot of pushback from employers because they're having to pay extra money, and it is a tax. It's an expense to them to have to pay this. So how do we do this? And kind of, there's no such thing as the word fair. There is no such thing as the word fair. What we have to do is find some things that are somewhat equitable and help people in the process. So I'm going to use, let's say the average person makes $75,000 and their tax rate is 20%. The income, $75,000, is probably pretty realistic. Most people make some two-income families make up to that much, some individuals make that much, some people make more. I'm not quite sure if that's a median income, but I think it's probably pretty close. But it works for my illustrative purposes. You take $75,000, your tax rate is 20%. And we're not going to talk about deductions and all that. This is just straight, simplistic, illustrative purposes. So that means of that $75,000, you were taxed $15,000, and you're taking home $60,000 after taxes. Still a pretty good amount of money. I mean, it's not, in today's world, that means you're getting $5,000 a month, pay rent, mortgage, $2,000, maybe more, pay car, maybe 2 cars if you're 2 people in your family. So that money goes pretty quick. Of course, with inflation, your grocery bill has gone up, your medicine bill has gone up, your electric bill has gone up, your gasoline for those cars has gone up. So everything takes a pretty big toll on your budget. So if you had a few extra dollars in your pocket, it would be beneficial. And I don't think there's going to be going to drive inflation, because we're not talking about increasing large amounts. But if we dropped, let's say, your tax rate down to 10%. That means at $75,000, you're paying $7,500. So that means you're putting $7,500 back in your pocket. Not even $1,000 a month. Not much. But now I'm going to take that $7,500 that I've just put back in your pocket and said, no, we're not going to put it all back in your pocket. We're going to take part of this tax decrease of income and slide it over into Social Security. One of the problems we have is Social Security is supposed to run out of money in, give or take, sometime in the 2030s, depending on how things shake out over the next few years. But this would increase it. Now, how much do we do? Do we reduce your tax to 15% and put 5% into Social Security? For illustrative purposes, I'm going to use that. So you now have $3,750 extra in your pocket, and $3,750 is going to go to Social Security. Now, this is spread out, of course, however you get paid. If you get paid weekly, every 2 weeks, monthly, however it is, of course, it'll be divided up, and that's how much it'll affect your paycheck. You will get a little bit extra in your pocket, and you're putting more towards Social Security. So you, the average middle class, lower middle class, working class, however it is, now have more money in your pocket, and you have more money going to Social Security, and it essentially didn't cost you anything. Now, again, the actual numbers can be played with. Again, the Office of Management and Budget would do all those numbers for some wonderful legislators who would try to work this out for us. But you would see that $3,750 going to your Social Security and some of that going to your pocket could be beneficial to you both now and in the future, which is what we would want our government to do, is help us now and in the future. Again, use this example for illustrative purposes. We're not trying to solve a lot of problems here or, get into the policy wonk of this. But if you could see that it isn't going to cost you a lot, it's going to give you something now and in the future. And of course, the tax rates change. And again, we're talking about it. We infamously have a graduated income tax, which if you look at the tax tables, it kind of looks like that. I think we could redo that and punch a little buttons and make people in the upper income stream pay a little bit more. We don't have to make them pay 90% or 80% or 75%. We can probably just go back up to some previous years, a couple tax breaks ago, that they benefited from, and switch that into our pockets. Now, employers, rightfully so, will say, well, if you increase the workers, does our percentage increase? And my thinking is this is going to get a little tricky, and this is where you need, the details, the devil in the details. But I would say for large corporations, and then where do you define a large corporations? It should also increase. But for small businesses, it should not increase because they're burdened. So with a lot of expenses, it's a little harder for them to make their ends meet because they're having to pay Social Security taxes for maybe 5 employees, 10 employees, 50 employees, 100 employees. Where do we find what is a smaller business that we would draw the line where they wouldn't have to pay for the increase themselves? I'm not sure. Again, you'd have to get into the details. But I think it would be beneficial for those small businesses not to have to pay this increase, or they pay it on a graduated scale. Of course, that creates a lot of number crunching for somebody to kind of manage. So I think it'd be better if we just drew a straight line and said, if you have this many employees or you make this much money, if you're below this line, you don't have to pay this increase or matching increase. And if you're above, you do. And, we're not talking about, we're talking 5% goes back to the people, but that's really what's $3,750 of $75,000. And that's the percentage that would increase for the businesses. Or we could draw it a little bit differently. I'm trying to keep the math simple, but you could draw it a little bit differently where the percentage for the corporations, the large corporations, goes up X amount in some kind of straightforward way, 2 or 3%, nothing drastic, maybe even just 1 or 2%. But it equates to the difference you've moved from the income tax into Social Security. Not the whole tax cut, just what's been moved into Social Security. Thought I was going to keep these numbers simple, and I just realized I painted myself into a little bit of a corner, but I'm good with it. I can sit here in my corner, I'm fine. Just to get into, there are things that can be done to help out across the board. Put some money in people's pockets now, put some money in people's future. Businesses, maybe we can make some other helpful attributes. Businesses contribute more to 401ks or other type, or going back to pension plans. Maybe they could have some of the Social Security increase tilted back towards towards their favor a little bit. I don't know, but in general, the concept is we as workers, as employees, as professionals even, because doctors and lawyers and people like that, they have to pay taxes and stuff like that. I think if they're self-employed, they have to even pay the full Social Security tax out of their own pocket. We can make, and again, that's why small businesses would be less affected, because a lot of the employers are paying, the entire amount of their Social Security out of their own pocket. And we do not want to discourage or hamper people trying to start businesses, people who run businesses, people who are trying to employ people. We do not want to hamper them. We want to be able to make sure they have a chance to earn some, maybe take advantage of maybe some of the tax breaks that they pay themselves a salary. A lot of business people understand that. There are ways if you incorporate, you pay yourself a salary and then pay yourself a bonus at the end of the year, your company profits. And of the salary, maybe they could bump themselves up and help them, going forward with their tax break, to themselves personally, and of course, increase what they're contributing to Social Security without bumping too much into their actual business profits. Yeah, there's a lot of push and pull in how you manage a business, but we don't want to take away from small businesses, but we do want to help workers. Large corporations, we'll use the favorite boogie person of large corporations, Walmart. I mean, that family has enough money. Sam Walmart did a great job, created a great business. It's done well for him and his family. But quite frankly, they got hundreds of billions of dollars. What are they going to do with their money that's going to benefit, society as a whole? I have nothing, they can still, nothing wrong with them still making money. But what they are doing with that money is not benefiting society. You can't amass so much personal wealth. It just gets pulled completely out of the economy. It's not driving new business. It's not driving its profits from the company. They could take less profits and create, do more for their employees, give people raises, give people better benefits, give people better profit sharing, all sorts of things where they could, take less out of their pocket and benefit their employees more at this point. I mean, once you have X number of billions of dollars, what do you need? Again, we're just trying to keep these people out of hell by doing better for their neighbors, so to speak. So those are just some rambling thoughts here on a kind of cloudy, rainy day here in the Dallas area. And we look forward to the debates between Trump and Harris, and we will talk to you next time.